The whistle never came. 83,000 people were on their feet. Scarves stretched overhead between raised fists, the noise so thick you could feel it in your teeth. A living pressure that pushed against the eardrums and settled somewhere behind the breastbone, like a second heartbeat that wasn't your own. It was the kind of sound that stops being sound and becomes weather. A front of human voice rolling around the inside of the bowl with nowhere to escape to, doubling back on itself, building. The referee was standing at the center circle with the ball tucked under his arm, not moving. And that stillness was the first wrong note in a symphony I had been listening to for 41 years. I noticed it because noticing things is what I do, what I have always done, what they paid me for. 4 decades of stadium security teaches a man to read a crowd the way other men read the sky before a storm. The small shifts in pressure that arrive long before the rain, the way the light changes, the way the birds go quiet. And what I was reading in that second half stoppage was wrong from the bones outward. The 4th official had dropped his electronic substitution board. It lay face down on the touchline grass where he had let it slip from his fingers, the little red numbers on its underside still glowing up at the floodlights. And a man does not simply drop a piece of equipment like that. Not a professional, not at a final. He drops it when something has just been said into his ear that erased everything else from his mind in a single second. The 2 linesmen were actually jogging. In the flat, urgent run of men who have been handed an instruction they don't fully understand, but have decided in their gut to obey instantly or toward the players' tunnel on the east side. And the players were following them. 22 professional athletes who had trained their entire lives never to leave a pitch mid-play were walking off it, heads turning, glancing at one another, glancing back over their shoulders at the stands, and a couple of them breaking into a half jog to catch up with the rest. And that broke a rule so fundamental that my stomach dropped before my mind had even finished assembling the reason for it. Players do not abandon a match in the 87th minute. Not for weather, not for crowd trouble, not for anything short of a voice in an earpiece telling them, calmly, that their lives depend on moving now. Then the tunnel doors sealed. Not closed, sealed. There is an enormous difference between those 2 words, and my body understood it before my mind could catch up. The hydraulic blast doors that the architects had built into the tunnel mouth after the 2016 security contracts, the slabs of layered steel I had been assured in 3 separate briefings would never once deploy except in a federally designated emergency, came down out of their ceiling housings all at once, in a single coordinated drop. They came down with a sound like a freight container released from a crane onto a concrete dock. A vast, flat clang that had beneath it the deeper, slower groan of hydraulics committing to a thing they would not undo. Steel meeting stone. The home end heard it a fraction of a second before the away end did. And from where I stood, I could actually see the wave of it move across the bowl, a turning of heads. A thinning of the chant in one section that spread to the next, like a candle being snuffed, and lighting the one beside it as it died. People do not panic at noise. I learned that early, and I have built my entire working life on it. People panic at the silence that follows a noise they cannot explain. In the half-second when 80,000 minds all reach for an explanation at once and come back with their hands empty, I keyed my radio, thumbing the transmit bar hard enough to hurt my thumb against the casing. Control, this is Marek, North Concourse. Wire the tunnel doors down. Confirm, over. I let go and I waited, holding my breath without deciding to. Nothing came back. Just the soft, even hiss of an open channel with no human being on the other end of it, sound I had heard 10,000 times across 10,000 quiet shifts, and which now, for the very first time in my career, made the hairs lift along my forearms. Before I take you all the way into that night, I want to say thank you to everyone who keeps coming back to these stories. And welcome if this is your first time sitting with us. If grounded survival stories like this one are your kind of thing, subscribe, leave a comment, and stay with me to the end. It genuinely helps this channel keep going. Now let me get back to what happened, because the door's ceiling was the smallest thing that went wrong that night. My name is Marek. I was 53 years old that summer, and my title was head of crowd safety operations for the stadium, which is a long and impressive arrangement of words that mostly meant I was the man they called when something didn't fit the manual. I had worked finals and derbies, a royal visit that emptied half the regional police budget, a bomb threat that turned out, in the end, to be a contractor's forgotten gym bag left in a plant room overnight. I knew this building the way you know a house you have lived in for 2 decades. The way you can walk it in the dark and feel where the walls are by the change in the air against your face, by the way the sound of your own footsteps tightens or opens up. I knew the tunnel doors had exactly 2 triggers, because I had sat through the long commissioning meetings and argued about both of them across a table covered in cold coffee and rolled up drawings. One was a manual key, a physical override held by the venue director in a small safe behind his desk. The other was an automated lockdown wired into the National Emergency Network. And that one was supposed to be next to impossible to activate. It required a federal authorization code routed through 3 separate desks in 3 separate buildings in 3 separate parts of the country, each of which had to confirm in sequence before the system would so much as twitch a relay. So when those doors came down without a single word reaching my radio, the first thing I felt was not fear. It was confusion. And confusion is worse, because confusion makes a man stand still at the exact moment he most needs to move. I stood there on the North Concourse for maybe 4 seconds. I have counted them many times since. I have lived inside those 4 seconds more often than I could ever say, watching 22 players and 3 officials vanish into a tunnel that had ceased to be a tunnel and become instead a flat gray wall of steel. And I told myself there was a procedure for this. There is a procedure for everything. That single sentence had been the spine of my entire professional life, the thing I leaned on, the thing I taught the young ones. And that belief was the very first thing the night took away from me. It took it gently, almost kindly, the way the tide takes the first inch of a sandcastle while you are still telling yourself the rest is safely above the waterline. The crowd was still mostly calm, and I want to be precise about what calm means in a space that size, because it is not the calm of a quiet room. 80,000 people do not turn all at once. They turn in pockets, like a dry field catching fire in a shifting wind. Little flares of unease igniting here and there, and then settling again, because the flames around them have not yet found enough dry grass to carry. Right then, the fire hadn't found its fuel. The big screens at either end of the bowl still showed the frozen match clock, 87 minutes and 40 seconds. The digits motionless and faintly absurd above all that human noise. And the broadcast feed had cut to a flat blue holding card with the tournament logo in one corner, the kind of card that means a technical fault. And the crowd read it as exactly that: a glitch, a hiccup, nothing. A few people booed. That low, good-natured boo a crowd gives a stalled replay. Someone over near the corner flag started a slow, ironic hand clap, the universal language of spectators who believe they have simply been made to wait. I remember being grateful for it, genuinely and stupidly grateful, because bored people are manageable people. And boredom was, for that moment, still sitting on my side of the table. I keyed the radio a second time. "Anyone on this channel, key up. This is Marek on North. Anyone at all, over." The hiss answered me, indifferent. And then a voice came, but not through my radio. It came through the PA, through the great speaker arrays hung from the roof girders, and it filled the whole bowl from the grass to the rafters. It was the venue announcer, a man named Peter, whom I had known and worked beside for the better part of 9 years. A calm professional with a voice like warm gravel, who could read an evacuation script and make customers 80,000 people believe they were strolling out for a coffee break and a stretch of the legs. And his voice, in that moment, was doing something I had never once heard it do in all our years inside that building together. It was shaking. "Ladies and gentlemen," Peter said. And the tremor in the second syllable was audible to anyone who knew him as I knew him. "Please remain in your seats. There is a temporary safety hold in effect. Please remain calm and remain in your seats. Further information will follow shortly." It was the right script. It was, word for word, the exact controlled hold script that he and I had drafted together 2 summers earlier over bad machine coffee in the operations office. A script we had argued over and trimmed and tested, designed from the ground up to soothe. But Peter read it the way a man reads the last sentence on a page that someone he is afraid of has just placed in front of him over his shoulder. And the crowd heard it too. That is the thing that people who have never worked a full stadium do not understand. The crowd is not deaf, and it is not stupid. It listens. 80,000 sets of ears caught the wrongness underneath his words, the fear bleeding through the practiced professionalism. And the slow hand clap died. Not into calm, into a quiet that was the precise opposite of calm. It was the quiet of a room full of animals that have all, at the same instant, caught the same scent on the wind and gone still to place it. I started moving toward the nearest internal stairwell, the one that dropped from the north concourse down to the operations level. Because if I could not reach control by radio, then I would reach it on foot. The concourse was a wide concrete ring that wrapped the entire bowl, lined along its inner wall with the rolled-down steel shutters of closed concession stands, and along its outer wall with the doors to the toilets and the mouths of the exit vomitories. The fluorescent tube lights, set into the ceiling at regular intervals, were doing something they should never have been doing. They were flickering, but not in the fast, dying strobe of a failing ballast. The kind I had replaced 100 times. They pulsed, slow and even, and deliberate. On for 3 full seconds, off for 1. On for 3, off for 1, with a regularity that no fault on earth produces. I stopped beneath one of them and tilted my head back to watch it. And the absurd, childish thought arrived before I could stop it. The building is breathing. 3 seconds in, 1 second out. The whole structure inhaling and exhaling around me, slow and patient as something asleep. A young steward in a high-vis vest came around the long curve of the concourse at a half run, the laminated badge on her chest bouncing against her sternum. Her name was printed on it in black block capitals, Ilsa. She was one of the seasonal hires we brought on by the hundreds for a tournament of this scale, no more than 22 years old, with a ponytail come half loose and a radio earpiece dangling unused at her collar. Her face wore the very specific blankness I have learned to recognize over the years, the slack, wide-eyed look of someone whose training has just run clean out of road, and who is operating now on instinct and the desperate hope that a grown-up will appear and tell them what to do. "Mr. Dosna," she said, and her voice came out thin and slightly too fast. "The doors at Section 12 won't open. The exit doors. I was trying to take a family out. The mother was having a panic attack. She couldn't get her breath. I thought fresh air. I thought just get her outside, and the crash bar just won't move. It's locked. From the outside. The little light on the lock housing is red. They're never red, are they? I've never once seen them red. That stopped my breath cold in my chest for a full second. The exit doors in a stadium are sacred, and I do not use that word lightly or for effect. There is no scenario, none anywhere in the entire body of crowd safety law, in which you lock the exit doors during a live event. That law is written in blood, in the names of people who died, crushed against barriers and gates at grounds whose names every person who does my job is made to learn by heart. The whole philosophy of a building like ours rests on one single principle, repeated until it becomes a kind of prayer. The venue must always, at every single moment, be able to empty itself faster than it can fill. Locking the exits is not a malfunction you correct with a work order. It is a decision that a person, or a system acting with a person's authority, has made on purpose. All of them? I asked. I kept my voice flat and even, because she was watching my face for permission to be afraid, and I would not give it to her. I don't know. I tried 3 of them. All 3 were red. Her hands were trembling, and she had noticed it herself, and pressed them flat against the front of her thighs to make them stop. Stay with that family, I told her, and I reached for the steady voice, the one I'd spent half my life building, layer by layer. Keep them in their seats. Keep them calm. The mother, tell her to breathe out for longer than she breathes in. Slow. Count of 4 going out. That'll settle the panic faster than anything. And Ilsa, listen to me very carefully now. Do not tell anyone the exits are locked. Not your colleagues, not a single member of the public, not one word, not even a look. Do you understand me? The second a crowd this size believes it is trapped, people die. And they do not die from whatever locked the doors. They die from each other. In the press, at the bottom of the stairs, under the feet of the people behind them. The fear kills more than the threat ever does. Always has. So we keep it quiet and we keep them sitting. Can you do that for me? She nodded, too fast, her chin bobbing. And then she steadied it deliberately and nodded again, once slower, and turned and went back the way she had come at that same controlled half-run. I watched her until the curve of the concourse took her, and then I went down. The operations corridor under the north stand was a long, low passage of bare gray concrete and overhead cable trays, lit by those same pulsing tubes. And the first thing wrong with it was the silence. My footsteps were the only sound in the whole length of it, the scuff and slap of my shoes echoing off the hard walls and coming back to me thinned and strange. And that emptiness was its own alarm bell, louder than any siren, because that corridor was never, ever empty during a match. There should have been runners ferrying paperwork and lost property, cleaners pushing their wheeled bins, broadcast technicians trailing thick black cables behind them, a medic or two leaning in a doorway with a coffee. There was no one. The air down there was several degrees cooler than the bowl above, and it carried the familiar under-stadium smell of concrete dust and machine oil and old spilled beer soaked years deep into the floor sealant. But there was no movement in it at all, no human warmth, no breath but my own. I passed the medical bay, and its doors stood wide open, and the lights were on inside, and a half-eaten sandwich sat on the desk beside a radio that was still keyed open, transmitting its nothing into the void, and a wheeled office chair lay on its back on the floor with one caster still very slowly turning. Whoever had been here had left in a hurry, and they had not left by the corridor I had just walked down. because I would have passed them. They had gone somewhere else, fast, and I made myself not wonder where. The door to control sat at the very end of the corridor, and it was the heavy kind, a fire-rated slab with a keypad lock and a small reinforced viewing window set at eye height. Fine wire mesh laminated into the thickness of the glass. That little window gave me the first true measurement of how bad the night was going to become. Through it, I could see the room I knew so well, the long curved desk, the bank of CCTV monitors that showed every section of the stadium, the duty manager's station with its 3 screens and its worn keyboard, the whole wall of feeds. And I could see that every single one of those monitors was displaying the same thing. Not camera feeds, not the bowl, not the concourses, not the dark car parks. A single line of white text on a black field, repeated identically across every screen in the room. And I had to put my face flat against the cold glass to read it in the pulsing light. Containment protocol engaged. All egress suspended. Await federal instruction. Do not breach perimeter. I read it once. I read it twice. I read it a third time, because my mind kept sliding off the first word the way a hand slides off wet glass, refusing to find any grip on it. Containment. Not evacuation. Not a security alert. Not a fire hold. Not a weather lockdown. Words I knew. Words I had drilled. Words with procedures attached to them. Containment is a very particular word, and you do not use it for crowds you're trying to protect. You use it for things you're trying to keep inside a boundary. And I was inside that boundary. So were 83,000 other living, breathing human beings. I tried the keypad. I keyed in my own code, the 6 digits I'd used 1,000 times without thinking. And the little indicator flashed red, and the lock did not release. I tried the duty manager's override sequence, the one I wasn't strictly meant to know, but had watched Bodan enter so many times that it lived in my fingers now without passing through my head. Read, rejected. I rapped my knuckles on the reinforced window, 3 sharp raps, and after a moment, a face swam up out of the room's dim interior toward the other side of the glass. It was Bodan, the duty manager, a heavy and careful man I had worked alongside for 11 years. A man who packed the same boiled egg sandwiches every single shift and complained about his knees in the cold and could talk a drunk out of a fight without ever once raising his voice. He looked at me through the wire-laced glass, the way you look at someone standing on the wrong side of a thing that cannot be undone. The way a man watches a friend through the window of a train that has already, silently, begun to pull away from the platform. He reached out and pressed the intercom button mounted in the door frame, and his voice came through the little perforated grill, small and tinny and stripped clean of all its usual warmth. "Marek, you shouldn't be down here. Open the door, Bodan." "I can't." He said it simply, plainly, and the plainness of it was the worst part of all. The lockdown overrode my entire station 11 minutes ago. I can see everything in this building, and I can't touch one single piece of it. The doors, the lights, the PA, the screens, the ventilation, all of it's running off the federal node now. The instruction came in clean. No phone call, no warning, no human voice on the other end. Just a packet of data hitting our network, and then the whole building stopped answering to me. I'm sitting in the heart of the control room, and I have less control than you do standing out there in the corridor. What is containment? I pressed my flat hand against the cold glass without deciding to, as though I could reach through it. "Bodan, the screen says containment. What are we containing?" He didn't answer right away. He looked back over his shoulder at his bank of dead monitors, at that single line of white text repeated 40 times across the wall in the dark. And then he leaned in close to the intercom and lowered his voice. And I will never forget that he lowered his voice, because there was no one else in that room with him. And a man only whispers when he's afraid that the walls themselves might be listening. There was a flight, he said. Came into the international terminal this morning, early, before any of us were even on shift. A delegation, or supporters, I don't have the manifest. I only know it was connected somehow to one of the visiting nations. Customs flagged it for a medical inspection. I caught that much off the city emergency band before the protocol cut us clean off the network. And then about 2 hours ago, the hospital out near the airport went dark. Completely dark. No calls in, no calls out, no data, no telemetry, nothing. And then this. He tapped the glass once with one thick finger, indicating the text behind him. They have not told us what it is, Marek. There has been no voice on any channel, no instruction, nothing at all but the protocol running itself like a clock. But I have read the manual for the thing that's controlling our building right now. I read it cover to cover during the last revision cycle because it's filed under my responsibilities, and I'm thorough. It is the protocol written for one specific scenario, and one only: a biological release inside a mass gathering venue. And the rule it follows is simple and absolute. The doors do not open until a federal medical team physically arrives and clears the site from the outside. That could be hours, Marek. Reading it now, knowing what I know, it could be days. Behind me and above me, up through the concrete and the stairwell, 83,000 people were sitting in a sealed bowl beneath pulsing lights. And they did not know any of this yet. But they would. A crowd that size always finds out, in the end, by one route or another. And the only question that mattered to me in that corridor was whether they found out from me, in order, with a plan attached to it, or whether they found out from rumor, all at once, in a single wave that no man alive could stop. And I already understood, standing there with my hand flat on the cold glass, that whatever had come in on that flight, the doors closing was not built to keep it out. The protocol had triggered after it was already inside the walls. The doors had closed to keep it in, with us. I made myself stand very still in that corridor and think, because the next 10 minutes were going to decide whether the night became a tragedy I could measure in some manageable number, or one I could not measure at all. 11 years of incident planning rose up in me, and it came back not as panic, but as a checklist, the way it is supposed to. The way the diver's training rises up cold and orderly through the fear when the regulator fails at depth. I went through it the way you check your pockets before you jump. I had no radio link to my stewards. The channel was a dead and indifferent hiss. I had no control over the building, not one door, not one light. I had a crowd that was, for this moment only, confused rather than afraid. And confusion was a clock already running down. And I had Bodan sealed inside a room he could not leave, watching dead screens, his hands useless in his lap. "Can you talk to me?" I asked through the intercom. "Even though you can't touch anything, can you see the cameras at all? Anything live?" "Some." He turned back to his desk and I heard his hands move across the keyboard, the familiar rattle of it. The protocol cut the feeds on the public screens and the main monitor wall. But I've still got a handful of internal cameras running through the old analog backup system, the one nobody ever upgraded, because nobody remembered it existed long enough to budget for it. It runs on its own little closed loop, completely separate from the main network, its own power, its own cable. The protocol didn't seize it because the protocol doesn't know it's there. I can see the tunnels, part of the pitch, a slice of the lower west stand, gray and grainy, but I can see. "Then you're my eyes," I said, and as the words left me, the shape of the plan assembled itself in front of me. Thin and desperate, but real. Something to hold. Here's how we do this. I'm going back up. I'm going to keep this crowd seated and calm for as long as I physically can. You watch the building through whatever cameras you've still got. And you tell me the second anything changes, anyone moving who shouldn't be moving. Any door, any light, any shift at all, however small. We run this thing together, through that intercom and those analog cameras and nothing else. Because that is the entire toolkit we have left between us. You and me, and a dead building hanging in the middle. Marek. He stopped, and his voice changed, the professional layer of it cracking down the center to show the man underneath. The hospital that went dark. The one out near the airport. It's the one my sister works at. Night shift, in the children's ward. I've called her 4 times since it happened. It doesn't even reach voicemail anymore. It just rings, and rings, and rings. I did not have anything to give him for that. And I knew better, after 11 years, than to pretend that I did. The worst thing you can do to a frightened man is hand him a comfort that you both know is hollow. He will hear the hollowness and trust you less for everything that comes after. Watch the tunnels, I said quietly, after a moment. I need you sharp, Bodan. I need the best of you tonight. Watch the tunnels and tell me what moves. And I turned and went back up the corridor, past the spinning chair that had finally come to rest, past the open medical bay and its dead transmitting radio. And as I climbed the stairwell back up toward the bowl, I could already hear that the texture of the noise above me had changed. It was not the noise of a paused football match anymore. It was lower, and it moved differently, sliding around the inside of the bowl in long, slow currents. The way water moves differently inside a vessel when it has begun, somewhere down beneath the surface, to look for a way out. The first real fracture happened at section 19. I came up out of the stairwell into the lower bowl just as it began, and I saw the whole shape of it form from above, which was the only mercy the night granted me in that moment. I saw the wave gather while I still had time to brace against it. A big man in the away end, in a red supporter's shirt stretched tight across heavy shoulders, had decided he was leaving. He had brought his family down the steps to the vomitory, the dark mouth of the exit passage that led out under the stand. And he had found the steel shutter rolled all the way down across it. And instead of doing what Ilse's family had done and quietly coming apart at the seams, he had begun to kick it. The flat of his boot against the corrugated steel made a hollow, booming drum note that rolled out across that entire silent section. And it was a sound the crowd understood instantly and completely, the way you understand a scream from another room before you have made out a single word of it. It was the sound of a locked door. It was the sound that says, "We are trapped." Made physical, made loud, made real. Heads turned toward it first, then shoulders. Then whole bodies came up out of their seats, and within seconds, 100 people in that section were on their feet and moving down toward the vomitory to see the thing for themselves. And 100 people moving toward a single locked exit is the exact geometry from which a fatal crush is born. I keyed the intercom on my handset out of pure ingrained habit before I remembered there was no one on the other end to answer. And then I did the only thing I had left to do, which was to use my own body and my own voice. And 41 years of being the man who does not run when everyone else is about to. I went down the steps into section 19 against the flow of people, which is the single hardest thing to do physically, pushing down through bodies that are all pushing up. And the single most important thing to do tactically, because a crowd reads a calm man moving deliberately toward the danger as information. The reasoning runs underneath thought, faster than words. If he is not running, then maybe it is not what we think it is. I shouldered down through the press, kept my hands open and visible, and held low where they could see them, and got myself to the front of it, right up against the cold, corrugated steel of the shutter. I put my back to it and turned to face them, and raised both hands flat, palms out, and I reached for the voice. Not a shout. Shouting tells a crowd to be afraid, confirms the fear, lights the fuse. The other voice, the low one that sits underneath the panic instead of riding on top of it, the one that took me 20 years to find and another 20 to learn how to hold. I need everyone to stop exactly where you are and give me 10 seconds, I said. And I felt the front rank of them hesitate, felt the wave catch against itself. My name is Marek. I run safety in this building. And I'm going to tell you the truth, all of it, because you are grown adults, and you will know it the second I lie to you. That bought me a half-second of real attention. And in crowd work, the half-second is the whole game, because attention is contagious, and so is its opposite. There has been a health alert outside this stadium, not in here outside, in the area around the building. The authorities have asked us to hold inside while they clear that area. The doors are being held by them, by the government, not by us. They are beyond my reach and beyond anyone's reach in this building. And the single safest thing for every person standing on these steps right now is to sit back down. If we crowd this exit, somebody is going to get hurt. And it will not be the alert that hurts them. It will be us. It will be a foot on a chest at the bottom of these stairs, in the dark, where nobody can see to help. So I'm asking you, the way I would ask my own family, and I mean that go back to your seats and sit down. It was not true that the alert was only outside. I did not know where the alert was, but it was the lie that kept 80,000 people from killing one another in the next 90 seconds. And I would tell it again tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day until I died. The big man in the red shirt stood directly in front of me, chest heaving, fists still half raised at his sides, the muscles in his jaw bunching and releasing. And his eyes were doing the thing that frightened, angry eyes always do, flicking fast between my face and the shutter and his family, looking for the move that protected them. I looked at him, and I let him look back at me. And then I dropped my voice down so that it was just for him, just the two of us alone, in the middle of all those people. You've got kids here, I said. I can see them right behind you. So do half the people on these steps. You start a stampede on this stairway, and your kids are the ones at the bottom of it, under everybody else. And there's nothing you'll be able to do about it. I cannot hold this section without you. I need you on my side. Help me get them sitting. And something in him broke the right way, the way it breaks in good men under pressure, when you stop threatening them and start giving them a job to do, a purpose to pour all that terrible energy into. The fists came down. He let out a long breath through his nose, and then he turned around to face his own people, and he started telling them to sit, to back up, to give the man some room. And they listened to him far more readily than they had listened to me, because he was one of them, in their colors, with their accent, their face, and that is a thing that no uniform on earth can ever buy. If you have ever stood in a crowd at the exact moment it decides which way to break, then you know, the second I'm describing that knife's edge where it could still go either way, and the whole future of 1,000 people balances on it. And I want to ask you something now, and I mean it honestly, not as a storyteller's trick. If you had been standing where I was standing, with no radio, no backup, no plan but your own voice, and 80,000 frightened people in front of you, would you have told them the comforting lie or the dangerous truth? Sit with that one for a moment, wherever you are. because I've never once stopped sitting with it. The section settled. Not calmed, settled, the way a damaged building settles. With the cracks still running invisibly through its walls, the load still searching out new paths around the broken places. I got them seated. I got the big man, whose name turned out to be Goran, posted at the mouth of the vomitory with a job to keep him steady to stop anyone else from testing the shutter and starting the whole thing over again. And I climbed back up to the concourse rail, where I could see across the lower bowl, and just as importantly, be seen. My shirt was soaked through and clinging cold to my back. It had been a warm evening at kickoff, the air heavy with the day's heat, and the bowl was holding that heat now the way a stone holds it after the sun has gone down, releasing it slowly back into the trapped and unmoving air. I registered that fact and filed it away as a future problem, a serious one, because 83,000 human bodies packed into a sealed concrete vessel generate an enormous and continuous load of heat. And the ventilation system that should have been carrying it away was tied into the exact same building management network that had stopped answering to anyone alive. If the air handlers shut down, the temperature would climb, and heat panics a crowd faster than almost anything I know, faster than darkness, almost as fast as fire. Bohdan's voice came through my handset then. He had found a way to patch the analog intercom loop onto a frequency my radio could still receive, which was the first genuine piece of luck the night had handed me, and I felt a small, absurd flare of gratitude for it. His voice was tight, careful. "Marek, East Tunnel. You need to see this, and I don't have the words for what I'm looking at. Tell me what's there, plainly. Just describe it." "There's a man down on the floor of the East Tunnel, just inside the sealed door on the far side from you. I think he's one of ours. I can see a high-vis vest, the reflective bits catching the light. He's down on the tiles. And there are 2 other people standing over him, very close, almost on top of him. But they're not helping him. They're not crouching down. They're not reaching for him. They're not doing anything at all. They're just standing, right over him. And they're not standing right, Marek. The posture is wrong. I can't explain it better than that. And one of them just put its face against the wall, the tiled wall, the side of the tunnel, and it's holding it there, pressed flat. It's been holding its face against that wall for over a minute now. People don't do that. There's no reason on earth for a person to do that. A cold thing slid down the entire length of my spine that had nothing to do with the heat of the bowl or the sweat going cold on my back. Can you see the man on the floor? The steward? Is he moving at all? He's moving now. A pause, and in the pause I could hear Bohdan breathing through his open mouth. He's getting up, but not Marek. He's not getting up like a hurt man gets up. A hurt man protects the part of him that hurts. He favors a side. He uses his arms. He tests his weight. This is he's getting up wrong too, same as the other 2. Like none of them quite remember how the parts are supposed to fit together. I want to be precise about what I believed in that moment, because every single thing I did afterward grew directly out of that belief. And if I tell this part wrong, then I tell the whole night wrong. I did not believe in monsters. I am a man who has spent his entire working life around the very worst things that ordinary crowds do to one another in confined spaces. And I had a rational frame ready and waiting for almost anything. A chemical exposure producing neurological symptoms, disorientation, repetitive compulsive movement, loss of balance and proprioception, a mass panic-induced fugue state, a man in the grip of a seizure that someone else nearby had mistaken for a simple collapse. Even a deliberate, coordinated act by people who had come into that stadium for the specific purpose of causing a scene and a casualty. What I did not have, anywhere in 41 years of frames and procedures and hard-learned lessons, was a category for two human beings standing in a tunnel pressing their faces flat against cold tile, while a third man rose up off the floor in a manner that made a steady, careful, thorough professional like Bowden run clean out of words. The word containment sat in the dead center of my chest like a stone I had swallowed whole and could not bring back up. And the protocol he had named the one written for a biological release in a crowded venue was no longer an abstraction filed away under his responsibilities. Something had come into the East Tunnel, and the East Tunnel was sealed on the far side, away from us, which meant that the only thing standing between it and 83,000 people was a single blast door that the federal node could choose to open at any moment, without warning, without asking me, on a schedule that I could not see and could not stop. "Bowden," I said, and I kept my voice level by main force, the way you hold a heavy thing steady when your arms have started to shake. "The East Tunnel door, is it sealed on our side as well? Is it holding them in or only holding us in?" "Both. Right now, both. The blast doors seal that tunnel from the pitch and from the corridors, all of it. But Marek, the protocol, cycles the doors. That's the whole design of the thing. It has to open and close them on a schedule, so that the medical teams can move through the building when they arrive, room by room, sealed zone by sealed zone. It's not meant to be a permanent wall. It's meant to be a controlled airlock, opening and closing for the people in the suits. And if it opens that East Tunnel door to the pitch level on its next cycle, then they're in the bowl," I finished for him. And the words came out of me flat and cold and somehow already certain. "How long are the cycles? How much time between openings?" "I don't know. That timing's not in the manual I read. It's set on the federal side. It's not ours to see. But Marek, the lights, the pulsing lights." His voice dropped lower. "I've been watching them this whole time, like you told me. On for 3 seconds, off for 1. The same rhythm everywhere in the building, all at once, every camera I've got. I don't think that's a fault. I don't think it ever was. I think the protocol is counting something. I think the building is running a sequence, and we are inside the sequence, and the lights are the clock. I looked up at the fluorescent tube above my head, on for 3 seconds, off for 1, on for 3, off for 1. And the understanding arrived all at once, cold and complete and sickening. I had been standing beneath a countdown for the better part of an hour without knowing what it counted toward. The building was not breathing. It was timing. And somewhere in that patient, even sequence, there would come a moment when the door between the thing in the East Tunnel and the crowd would open, because the system had been told to let the medical teams pass through. And the system did not know that the medical teams were not coming. And it did not know that what was in that tunnel was no longer a patient. I had to get to that door before the cycle did. And I had no way to open it, to hold it or to lock it, because the building had stopped belonging to me 11 minutes before I had even known the night had begun. The pitch was the only road open to me. The East Tunnel emptied out onto the pitch at player level, and the pitch was the single open space in the entire sealed building that I could still physically reach, by way of stairs that had not shuttered. I went down through the player's access route on the north side, the corridor I had walked behind 1,000 visiting teams over the years. And the doors along it were the lighter internal kind, not blast-rated. And they still answered to the physical brass master key on my belt. The federal node had seized every electronic system in the building, but it could not reach a single finger into a mechanical lock. That brass key, an object I had carried on my hip for 2 decades and barely thought about from 1 year to the next, had become in the space of a single hour the most valuable thing I owned in the world. I came out at pitch level into the strange, hushed emptiness of an abandoned technical area. The substitutes' benches stood empty, the cushioned seats still holding the warmth and the shape of the men who had so recently vacated them. Water bottles lay knocked over on their sides, one of them still glugging its contents out across the rubber matting in a slow, spreading dark patch. A physiotherapist's bag had been dropped and had spilled its contents in a fan across the floor rolls of tape, scissors, foil emergency blankets, little tubes and canisters scattered like dice. I stepped over it and out onto the very edge of the grass. The pitch itself was an enormous green rectangle under the white blaze of the floodlights. The grass mown into its perfect alternating stripes, immaculate, ready, waiting for a game that would never finish. And above it, on all four sides, the full bowl rose up into the dark 83,000 faces stacked in their tiers, climbing away from me into the night. Down there at grass level, you feel the weight of all those people in a way you never feel it from the concourse. It presses down on you from every direction at once. You are standing on the floor of a canyon made entirely of human beings, and they were all watching me now. A single man, alone, walking out onto the pitch where there should have been 22 players and a referee. I knew exactly how that read from up there in the dark. It read as the situation getting stranger, and stranger was my enemy every bit as much as anything in that tunnel was. I crossed the grass to the east tunnel mouth. The blast door was down a slab of dull gray steel set flush into the concrete arch of the tunnel. And in the center of it, at face height, was a narrow inspection hatch. A small reinforced viewing port no bigger than the palm of a hand. I should not have looked. The first and simplest rule of 41 years in this work, the one I taught every new hire on their first morning, is this: do not get close to the thing you do not understand. That is the rule, and I broke it. The only rule I broke that entire night, because I told myself that I could not make a sound decision in the dark, that I needed to know with my own two eyes what it was I was protecting these people from. So I leaned in, and I put my face to the port. The east tunnel was lit by the same stuttering pulse of the fluorescents. 3 seconds on, 1 off. And in that broken, flickering light, I saw 3 figures. The steward Bodan had described was on his feet now, down at the far end. And even through the thick glass and the bad light, I could see that Bodan had chosen his words exactly right. The man stood wrong. His head was canted over hard toward one shoulder, at an angle a living neck does not hold and would not want to. And his weight was pitched forward onto the balls of his feet, like a man caught in the very first instant of beginning to fall, who had simply stopped, mid-fall, and stayed there, defying it. The other 2 were closer to my side of the door. One was still pressed face first against the tiled wall, utterly motionless, a held and forgotten thing. The other turned toward the door as I watched, turned slowly, as though it had felt me there, though I had made no sound. And the glass between us was thick, and I knew it could not have heard me. And I saw its face full on, in a single pulse of the light. I am not going to describe its face in the way that sells a story, with the teeth and the gore and the rest of it. I am going to tell you the true thing instead, which is far worse than any of that. There was nothing in it. Not rage, not hunger, not pain, not fear, not anything I had a name for. It was the face of someone you know, who is standing right in front of you, and will not come to the door, the lights all on inside the house, and no one home, and no one coming. The eyes found the viewing port, and found me behind it. And for half a second, there was something in them that might have been recognition, and might have been nothing at all. A flicker that my mind desperately wanted to read as human, and could not be sure of. And then the figure walked into the door. Not at me, not a lunge. Nothing so dramatic or so simple as that. It walked into the steel the way you walk into a glass wall you didn't see was there, full-faced, and its forehead met the door with a soft, heavy knock, and it did not flinch, and it did not step back, and it did not register the impact at all. It did it again, and again. The same slow, patient knock of bone on metal, like a large, soft moth working a window pane. In the dark, tireless. And I understood, watching it through the glass, that the thing was trying to come through, and that the only reason in the world it could not was the steel itself. I stepped back from the port, and my hands were shaking openly, which they had not done in 11 years of this work. Behind me, out on the open pitch, I heard the sound I had been dreading all night, without yet daring to name it, the deep, rolling murmur of 80,000 people reacting all at once to something. I turned around. They could not see into the tunnel, but they could see me. They had watched the safety man, the lone figure out on the grass, lean in and put his face to a sealed door and then recoil from it, stagger back a full step. And a recoil at full bowl scale is a message that travels in every direction at once, up through all the tiers, around the long curve of the stands, faster than any rumor. The murmur was building, voices feeding on voices, and I felt the whole bowl beginning to lean forward over the edge of something I could not pull it back from. And then the lights stopped pulsing. They held steady, full, bright, constant for the first time since the doors had come down. And in the sudden, even wash of that light, I heard a new sound rise up through the soles of my shoes. A deep, mechanical groan that I recognized because I had heard it once before, years earlier, during a commissioning test in an empty and echoing building. It was the sound of a blast door beginning its cycle. I snapped my head around toward the east tunnel door, toward the slab of steel between me and the three figures, and I saw the seam at the very bottom of it lift a half-centimeter clear of the concrete floor, a thin, black line of darkness opening along its base, with a sharp hiss of escaping pressure. The door was opening. "Bodan," I said into the handset, and my own voice came back to me flat and fast and like a stranger's. "The east door's cycling. It's opening right now. Can you stop it? Anything at all?" "No." His voice cracked clean down the middle. "I told you I can't touch it. It's the protocol. It thinks it's letting a medical team through. It's doing exactly the thing it was built to do. Marek, get off the pitch. Get away from the door. Get up into the stands. Get out of there. Please." I did not get away from the door. I want to be honest about that, because in all the months since, every single person who debriefed me, every official across every table in every fluorescent-lit room, asked me the same question, "Why did you stay?" And I gave them all the same official answer, which was that I had assessed the risk to the crowd as greater than the risk to myself, and made the call accordingly. That answer is true, but it is not the whole truth, and I promised you the whole truth at the very start. The real reason is simpler than that, and worse. There were 83,000 people in that bowl, and 3 things in that tunnel. And the door was opening onto the pitch, and the pitch was the floor of the bowl. And if those 3 got out onto the grass and up into the packed lower tiers, there would not be a crush. There would be a slaughter, in the half-dark, among children, and I was the only human being standing between the door and the crowd. So I did the arithmetic that men in my job spend their whole careers praying they will never once have to do. And the arithmetic said stay, so I stayed. The door was rising slowly. It was engineered for the dignified passage of stretchers and medics in heavy suits, not for speed. and it had cleared perhaps the width of a hand when I dropped down and forced my fingers under the rising bottom edge of it. It was enormously, impossibly heavy, and there was no holding it by strength. Try that, and you lose the fingers, the whole hand. But I knew this door. It ran in steel tracks up either side of the arch, and those tracks had emergency stop points, manual maintenance pins meant to lock the door at a chosen height so that engineers could work on it safely. There was a heavy steel pin on a short length of chain housed in a recess set into the side of the arch, and I knew where it was because I had stood and watched the commissioning engineers test it. Bored half to death years ago, thinking it would never once matter in my lifetime. I let go of the door and threw myself sideways at the recess and got the cold pin into my fist. And I drove it home into the track stop with the heel of my hand just as the door cleared the height of my knee. The door stopped. The motor strained against the pin, the whole heavy frame of it groaning under the load, and it held. There was now a gap at the bottom of the east tunnel door, perhaps 2 feet high, too low for a standing man to pass through, but not too low, I understood with a lurch in my gut, for something that no longer cared in the slightest about how a human body was supposed to move through space. And on the far side of that gap, in the steady and merciless light, the 3 figures had registered the opening, and the nearest one was lowering itself toward the floor, not crouching, not kneeling, but folding, the way a heavy coat slides off a hook, boneless and wrong, and beginning to come. I had a 2-foot gap and a pin holding it open, and a thing crawling toward it across the tiled floor, and a crowd of 83,000 at my back. I had no weapon. I had a brass key, a radio handset, and 6 feet to my left. The spilled physiotherapist's bag, with God alone knew what inside it. And kneeling there on the cropped grass of a stadium where I'd watched the greatest game on earth played out in front of the watching world, with my hands raw and stinging and bleeding from the cold steel of the door, I understood that the night had stopped being about crowd management. It had become entirely and only about the gap. Everything from here forward was the gap. I lunged sideways for the physio's bag and dragged it to me by its strap and tore it the rest of the way open. And my hands went through it fast, and blind tape, scissors, a crinkling foil emergency blanket, sachets of energy gel, das, and at the very bottom my fingers closed around a small aluminum canister, cold to the touch even before I read it. A freeze spray. The numbing aerosol they hit a player's knock with on the touchline. Instant cold to kill the pain of a dead leg long enough to walk it off. Not a weapon, but the only object within my reach that did anything at all to the physical world. And a desperate mind moves very fast indeed. I twisted back toward the gap, and the first figure was already there, the steward, its head and one shoulder through to my side now, dragging the rest of itself onto the grass with that wrong, pitched forward weight, and the smell came through with it. I have never once been able to describe that smell to anyone in a way that lands. The closest I can come is this: sweet and chemical and wrong. A hospital corridor and spoiled fruit. And underneath both of those a third thing, a low animal note that the oldest and deepest part of my brain understood completely and instantly, before any of the rest of me had caught up. A smell that said one single word, clear as a struck bell in an empty church. Leave. I did not leave. I jammed the nozzle of the freeze spray against the side of its head, behind the ear, and I held the trigger down, and the canister emptied itself in one long, hissing jet of freezing white vapor. And the thing flinched. It actually flinched, jerked its head violently sideways, a real recoil, the first reaction I had seen from any of them that looked like a living creature responding to pain. It bought me a second, maybe 2. I used them to do the only thing left to do, which was to get the pin back out. If I pulled the maintenance pin, the door would finish its travel under its own motor, and it would come down on whatever happened to be in the gap. The steward was half through. If I dropped the door now, it would come down across its body, and I could not know whether that would stop it, or simply divide it into two halves that both went on moving. And behind it, the second figure was at the gap now, lowering itself, and the third was rising at the far end of the tunnel and beginning its slow walk forward. I had perhaps 3 seconds before all three were committed to the opening, and the brutal arithmetic laid itself out in front of me with terrible, perfect clarity. If I waited until all three were in the gap and then dropped the door, I might catch all three at once. If I dropped it now, I caught one and turned the other two loose onto the pitch and the crowd. If I hesitated even a moment too long, all three came through clean, and the door closed behind them, leaving them on the grass, on the wrong side of everything, with 80,000 people above. There is no training for that. There is no manual, no flow chart, no procedure filed anywhere under anyone's responsibilities. I made the choice, the way every choice that has ever truly mattered gets made alone and in the dark, and without nearly enough information. And I made it fast, because fast was all the time I had. I let the steward come most of the way through. I let the second figure put its head and one reaching arm into the gap. I emptied the very last gasp of the freeze canister into the face of that second one to slow it at the threshold, to make it flinch and stall with its body across the line. And when both of them were committed to the opening, fully into the gap, and the third was still a clear body length back across the tiles, I pulled the pin. The door came down. It came down with the full engineered weight of layered steel and a motor that had been straining the entire time to finish its interrupted cycle. And it came down across the two figures in the gap. And the sound that it made is the sound I hear on the nights I cannot sleep, which is most of them now. It was not a clean thing. Steel is patient, and bodies are not. And the door did not stop the way a door stops in a story when it meets a person. It ground, and it forced, and it kept on traveling. Because the protocol that drove it did not recognize any obstruction it had a reason to care about. And the seal at the bottom met the concrete with a final hydraulic sigh, and the east tunnel was sealed again. And on my side of it, on the grass, lay what the door had caught and divided, and they were still moving. That is the part nobody believes until I tell them what I did next. And the truth is that I did not handle it well. I dragged myself backward across the grass on my hands and heels, away from the things on the ground that should have stopped and had not. And I was sick, openly and helplessly, on the turf of a stadium where World Cups had been won and lost in front of the watching earth. And above me, all around me, 83,000 people had gone silent in the way that only a vast crowd can ever fall silent. A silence so total and so heavy that I could hear the floodlights humming faintly in their gantries high overhead, because they had all seen it. The big screens were dead, but the flood-lit pitch is the single most visible stage in the entire building, lit like an operating theater from 4 directions. And I had just performed the most appalling thing any of them would ever witness in their lives, at the dead center of that stage, with no announcer to explain it and no truth I could possibly shout up at them that would make what they had seen bearable. I keyed the handset with a hand I could barely make obey me. Bodan. 2 are down on the pitch side, and they're not stopped. 1 still in the tunnel behind the door. The door's sealed again. But I need you to tell me there's some way to talk to these people because they just watched me. All of them. Every one of them. And if they break now, they will kill each other trying to get out of a building that is already locked. He didn't answer for a moment. When he did, his voice was very quiet, very steady, the way a man's voice goes when he's holding himself together with both hands. The PA's still on the protocol node. I can't reach it from here. It's gone. It left with everything else. A pause. But Peter's microphone, the announcer's booth, that's analog. It's on the same old backup loop as my intercom, the one the protocol doesn't know about. I can patch you straight to it. Marek, you'd be talking to all of them at once, with your own voice and nothing to stand behind. No script, no music, no Peter to soften it. Just you. Are you ready for that? I was not ready for that. No man is ever ready for that. But there was no one else, and a frightened crowd that has just witnessed something it cannot explain will write its own explanation within seconds. And the explanation that a terrified crowd writes for itself is always the one that gets people killed. So I sat there on the grass with two ruined things twitching 10 feet from my shoes, and the smell still coating the back of my throat, and I said, "Patch me through." There was a click and a low hum, and then the vast, PA-shaped silence of 83,000 people waiting. And into it came the sound of my own breathing, amplified and bounced back to me off all four stands. And I understood that I was about to perform the single most important piece of crowd management of my entire life, with no script, no rehearsal, and no possibility on earth of a second take. "My name is Marek," I said, and my voice rolled out around the bowl and came back to me a half-second later off the far stand, doubled and strange, my own words chasing me, and I made myself slow down and write it. Most of you have just seen something happen on this pitch that you are never going to forget for as long as you live. And I'm not going to stand here and insult you by pretending that you didn't. So here's the truth. All of it that I have. Because you have earned it tonight. And because frightened people deserve to be spoken to like adults, not managed like cattle in the dark. And I told them, not everything, I did not have everything, but the true shape of it. That a health emergency had come into the building. That the doors were sealed by the national authorities and not by us. That they were beyond my control, and beyond anyone's control, inside these walls. That what they had watched me do on the pitch, I had done to keep what was inside that tunnel from getting up into the stands among them and their children. And that it had worked. And that the door was sealed again, and that they were, for this moment, in this bowl, as safe as I knew how to make them. I told them that the most dangerous thing any of them could do now was move, because the building was full of locked doors, and a moving crowd in a locked building is the deadliest thing in the entire world, more deadly by far than anything that tunnel held. And then I did the thing that no manual on earth teaches, the thing I had learned over 41 years and could never have written down for anyone, which is that you cannot govern a frightened crowd by giving it orders. You govern it by giving it a job. I need every section in this stadium to do one single thing for me, I said. Look at the people sitting around you, right now. If anyone near you is unwell, struggling to breathe, going to pieces, you are now their helper, not a steward. You. Raise a hand, and a steward will come when one can. But until then, you stay with that person. You hold on to them. You talk to them. You tell them your name. You tell them it's going to be all right. There are 80,000 of you, and only a few hundred of us in these vests. So tonight, every single one of you is staff. We get through this the only way that people have ever gotten through anything, by getting each other through it. That is the entire plan. There is no other plan, and I will not lie to you and tell you there is. You look after the person sitting next to you, and you let me look after the doors. I have replayed that speech 10,000 times since, lying awake in the dark, asking myself over and over whether it was the right thing, whether telling the truth to 80,000 terrified people was a gift I gave them, or a bomb I lit with my own hand. I would genuinely like to know what you think was it the right call, to tell them the truth, or should I have kept lying to keep them calm a little longer? Because for about a full minute, I did not know which way it was going to break. And that minute was the longest of my entire life. The silence after I stopped speaking stretched and stretched and stretched. And then, somewhere down in the lower west stand, a single voice began to sing. It was the away supporters' anthem, the song they had been singing in the 87th minute before the world stopped. An old song, older than the club, the kind of song that gets passed down between generations of a city. And the single voice became 10, and the 10 became 100, and the 100 became 1,000. And within 15 seconds, the whole west stand had it, the whole away end. And then it crossed the bowl, and the home end took it up too. 80,000 voices. And it was not joy. It was something far older and far deeper than joy. It was a frightened crowd making the choice. Together all at once, to be a crowd instead of a mob, to be a people instead of a panic, choosing each other out loud in the dark, and the sound of it filled the sealed bowl from the grass to the roof, and pressed back against the dread like a flat hand braced against a closing door. And I sat there on the turf, and I wept quietly, where no one could see me, because I had asked 80,000 strangers to be better than their own fear. And they had answered me. They had said yes. I had bought us time. I did not yet understand what that time was going to cost, or that I had been counting it from the wrong direction the entire night. Bodan's voice came back into my ear as the singing rolled on overhead, vast and steady. Marek, it worked. They're seated. They're singing, look at them, all of them. They're holding it together. You did it. Then his tone shifted, dropped, hardened into something careful and deliberate. But I need to tell you something now, and I need you to keep your voice off the PA while I do it. Cut your mic to the bowl. Just you and me on this channel. Are we clear? I thumbed off the patch to the announcer's booth. Go. While you were talking to them, the protocol cycled again. The lights, the door timing, I've been sitting here, counting it the whole time, like you told me to, watching for any change in the pattern. And it's not random, Marek. I was wrong before, when I called it a clock counting down to a fixed time. It's worse than that. The building is running this on a condition, not a timer. And I think I have finally understood what the condition is. Tell me. The containment protocol isn't designed to hold the doors shut forever. It's designed to hold them until the site is cleared. And there are only 2 definitions of the word cleared written anywhere into that manual. The first one is the one I already told you. A federal medical team physically arrives, inspects the site, confirms that containment has been achieved, and releases the doors from the outside by hand. He stopped, and the stop went on a beat too long. And the second one? The second one is internal, automatic. The protocol has air sampling and motion sensors threaded through every sealed corridor and tunnel in the building. It's watching us, constantly, every second. And the manual says I read it 3 times tonight to be sure that when those sensors detect that the threat has stabilized, when there are no new exposure events and no new activity in the contained zones, when the building reads as quiet, the system logs the site as stabilized. on its own authority and releases the doors for the recovery teams to enter. His voice had gone completely flat now, the flat of a man holding something out at arm's length so that it cannot touch him. Marek. The protocol cannot tell the difference between a threat that has been contained and a building where everybody has simply stopped moving because they're dead. To the sensors, those two things are identical. No motion is no motion. Quiet is quiet. Up in the bowl above me, the singing rolled on. 80,000 people who believed I had a plan to get them home to their beds. "You're telling me," I said slowly. And I had to force each word out past the thing that was rising in my throat. "That the fastest way to make this building open its own doors is for everyone inside it to die." "I'm telling you, the system can't tell the two apart," he said. "And I'm telling you something worse, and I've checked it 3 separate times now, because I refused to believe it the first 2 times. The federal medical team, the one that's supposed to come from outside and clear us, release the doors, end all of this. I found the dispatch log. It's on the one live data feed I've still got down here. They were tasked 4 hours ago." Another silence, and this one lasted a small eternity. "To the hospital, near the airport, the one that went dark. The log shows them entering the building, and it never, ever shows them coming back out. There is no team coming to open our doors, Marek. There was one, and it went into the dark, hours before any of us in here even knew the dark existed. And the dark kept it." The singing washed down over me from all 4 sides. 80,000 people holding one another up in the only way frightened people ever can. Singing into a sealed concrete bowl, beneath a building that was waiting with infinite mechanical patience for every last one of them to go quiet, so that it could finally read the silence it needed and open its doors, and let the recovery teams walk in to count the bodies in the dark. And no one was coming to open those doors from the outside, because the only people on Earth with the authority to do it had already walked hours before into the very same dark that we were now sealed up inside of. I had spent the entire night fighting to keep these people alive, and seated and calm. And I'd been fighting in precisely the wrong direction the whole time. Every minute that I kept them still and quiet and breathing, I was keeping the building from reading the silence it needed in order to open. And every minute, the thing in the east tunnel went on moving. The sensors read it as an active threat and held the doors fast against us. The 2 facts ground against each other in my head. 2 gears with no teeth that fit, until I understood the whole shape of the trap all at once. The only way out was through a door that would not open while we were alive and moving, controlled by a system whose only outside key had already been swallowed whole by the very thing it had been built to protect us from. I had assumed the entire night, the way you assume the floor will hold your weight when you step out of bed in the dark, that this was a siege, that we hold on, we keep people calm, we wait it out, and eventually the authorities come and unlock the doors and it ends, and we all go home. That single assumption had shaped every decision I had made since the doors first came down. And now it was gone, kicked clean out from under me. There was no cavalry. There was a building that wanted us silent, a tunnel that wanted us, and 80,000 people singing in the dark because I had told them, with my own voice, to trust me. "Bohdan," I said, "if there's no team coming from outside, then somebody inside this building has to open these doors from the inside. Tell me that's possible. Tell me there's some override the protocol can't reach." He was quiet for a long moment, and I could hear him thinking, hear him pulling something up out of the depths of 11 years of knowing this building. "There's one," he said at last. "There is exactly one. And Marek, you are not going to like where it is. The override lived in the plant room. The deep plant room, 3 full levels below the pitch. Down where the mechanical heart of the building beat in the dark, the great air handling units, the water pumps, the main electrical distribution, and, crucially, the physical hardware interface to the building management system itself. Bohdan laid it out for me in a flat, fast voice. The voice of a man reading off a schematic he was seeing for the first time in his life and praying with every word that he was reading it correctly. The federal protocol had seized the building's network, its software brain. But the network ran on top of physical hardware, and that hardware still retained a maintenance bypass. A hardwired control panel, installed during the original construction and grandfathered through every single upgrade since, because ripping it out had never once been worth the cost. A panel that let an engineer take direct manual control of the door actuators underneath the software by physically throwing relays by hand. The protocol could not lock it, could not even see it, because the protocol did not know that it existed. It was a relic, an analog ghost haunting a digital building. And it was the only thing left in the world that could open these doors from the inside. Why am I not going to like where it is? I asked, though some quiet part of me had already begun to assemble the answer. Because the only route to the deep plant room that doesn't run through a sealed blast door, Bohdan said, goes through the lower service corridor. And the lower service corridor connects directly to the east tunnel. The same east tunnel you just sealed off. He let it land. The blast door you dropped it seals the tunnel from the pitch. It does not seal the tunnel from the service corridor at the other end. And the third one, Marek, the one still standing in there, the one that didn't make it into the gap. There is nothing between it and the route you'd have to walk to reach that override. If you go down there, you go down there with it. In the dark, just the two of you. I looked at the 2 ruined things on the grass, finally still now, finally gone quiet, and I understood that the entire night had been building toward exactly this. The way a tide builds, over long hours, toward the moment it finally tops a particular stone you have been watching the whole time, without admitting to yourself why. Above me, 80,000 people sang and believed I had a plan. And the plan, it turned out, was that I would go down into the dark, alone, past a thing I had watched walk its own skull into a steel door, to reach a panel that a man I had known for 11 years had discovered on a diagram 4 minutes ago in order to manually open the doors that the building itself was begging us all to stop being alive enough to need. Walk me through the panel, I said. Every relay, every switch. I need to know it cold before I'm standing in front of it, because I don't think I'm going to have the time to learn it down there. So, Bohdan walked me through it, slow and careful, making me repeat each piece back to him. The panel had a master enable a key switch that, and this was the one small mercy the building offered me that night, took the same brass maintenance key I carried right there on my belt. The building's old hardware recognizing its old keys the way a dog recognizes a voice it has not heard in years. There were banks of relays beneath a clear, hinged protective cover. 1 bank per door zone across the whole building. And to release the perimeter egress doors, I would have to trip the zones in a specific sequence because, Bohdan warned me, if I released them all at once, the inrush of current would trip the building's master breaker, and we would lose the floodlights and plunge 80,000 panicking people into total darkness, which was its own death sentence, and possibly the worst one of all. Tunnel zones first, he said. Then the concourse zone. Then the perimeter, last of all. So the people would move outward in a controlled wave, opening the building from its center toward its edges in a way that the electrical system could survive. He made me repeat the order back to him 3 times until it was carved into me like a name. Tunnel, concourse, perimeter. Outward, always outward. And the override doesn't touch the east tunnel internal door, he added. That stays sealed on its own circuit. You leave the third one locked in the tunnel where it is. Whatever you do, whatever happens down there, you do not open the east tunnel internal seal. Promise me that one specifically, Marek. Say it back to me. I do not open the east tunnel internal seal. Understood? Marek. His voice changed again, dropped into something I had not heard from him in all of 11 years. When the perimeter doors open, the building's air seal breaks. That's the whole point of the containment, to hold the contaminated air inside the boundary. The instant you open those perimeter doors, whatever is airborne in here goes out into the city, with 80,000 people carrying it on their clothes, in their hair, in their lungs. I've been sitting with that for the last 5 minutes, and I cannot make it not be true. If what came in on that flight is what I think it is, and we open those doors, we don't end the containment. We end it for us, and we begin it for everyone out there. And there it was, the real choice, the one the entire night had been walking me toward, step by patient step, stripped now of every last comfort and every last excuse. I could go down into the dark and open the doors and save 80,000 people in this bowl, by potentially handing whatever this was to a city of 1 million sleeping souls. Or I could leave the doors sealed, keep the contamination inside the boundary exactly as the building wanted it kept. Protect the city and stay in here, with 80,000 people, inside a building that would open only once every single one of them had gone quiet. Save the many outside by sacrificing the many inside, or save the inside and gamble the outside. There was no version of the next hour in which everyone lived. The architecture of the night had made certain of that, long before I ever arrived at the panel in my mind. I sat on the grass of a stadium where the greatest game in the world had been played in front of the watching earth, and I held that choice in my 2 raw and bleeding hands. And above me, people who had trusted me with their lives sang an old song about going home. I am not going to pretend I reasoned my way to the answer cleanly, by some calm, utilitarian arithmetic worked out on a clean sheet of paper. I would like to tell you that I weighed the numbers 1 million against 80,000 and chose the larger good with a clear and steady head. But that is not how it happened, and I promised you the truth. What happened is that I thought about Ilsa, 22 years old, sitting with a family and a mother who could not catch her breath. I thought about Goran, in his red shirt, posted at the mouth of the vomitory, keeping his own neighbors safe with the wall of his own body. I thought about the away end singing in the dark. And those people were real to me. They had faces. They had names I had learned in the last hour, voices I had heard. And the city outside was an abstraction, a number on a sign, 1 million strangers I would never once see. That is the terrible, honest mechanism by which human beings actually make these choices, whatever the philosophers in their clean rooms might say. We save the faces we can see. Anyone who tells you it works any other way has simply never been made to choose in the dark. But Bodan had handed me a third fact, and it changed everything. Though in my exhaustion, it took me a long moment to see what it truly meant. The federal team had gone into the hospital hours ago and never come out. The hospital had gone dark 2 full hours before our doors ever sealed, which meant that whatever this was, it was already out. It was already in the hospital, in the airport, in the ambulances that had carried people back and forth between the two, in the city. The containment of this stadium was not protecting a clean city from a contaminated bowl. The contamination had been loose out there for hours, since long before the final whistle that never came. And all that the sealed doors of this building were doing was adding 80,000 more bodies to a count that was already running, somewhere out there in the dark beyond the walls. The city was not clean. The city had not been cleaned since that flight touched down on the morning runway. Sealing us in did not protect a single soul. It only chose who would die first. That was the thought that let me get to my feet. Not certainty. I will never have certainty. Not about this. Not until the day I die. But the understanding that the choice I had thought I was being offered, save the few inside, or save the many outside, was a false one, a phantom, because the many outside were not safe, and had not been safe for hours. The only real choice left to me was whether 80,000 people would die quietly in a sealed bowl, so that a machine could log them as stabilized, or whether they would get the chance to run, the way human beings are meant to be allowed to run, into a night that was now dangerous everywhere. Yes, but that was at least open, at least theirs, at least a place where a man could die on his feet under the sky instead of waiting in a box. I would rather they ran. With everything left in me, I would rather they had the chance. "I'm going down," I told Bodan. And I got to my feet, my knees cracking in protest, the grass stains dark and wet on my trousers. "Tunnel, concourse, perimeter. Outward. I'm going to open the doors." "The air seal is already broken," I said. "It broke at the hospital 2 hours ago, Bodan. We are not letting anything out of this building that isn't already out there in the open. We are only letting people run. Now talk to me the whole way down, every step. You're my eyes, you're the only eyes I've got left. Don't stop talking, because the second you go quiet, I'm alone down there with it. And I don't think I can do this if I believe I'm alone." I took one more thing before I went. I went back to the spilled Physios bag and dug through it again, past the tape and the gels and the spent freeze canister. And at the very bottom, my fingers found a slim metal bar. A tool for popping the studs out of football boots, a forearm's length of steel, weighted heavy at one end. The nearest thing to a weapon the night had seen fit to offer me. I closed my fist around the cold of it until my knuckles ached. And then I turned my back on the bright pitch and the two still shapes and the singing. And I walked into the service stairwell on the north side, the brass key in one hand and the boot tool in the other. And as I descended, the singing faded above me, level by level, until there was only the hum of the lights, and Bodan's voice in my ear, and the sound of my own footsteps going down and down, toward whatever was waiting at the bottom. The lower service corridor was darker than the rest of the building. The protocol's pulsing lights did not reach down there the same way half the fluorescent tubes were dead in their fittings, their glass gone, the gray of old ice, and the half that still lived flickered without any rhythm at all, so that the corridor came at me in fragments. A stretch of stained gray wall, a sagging bundle of cable strapped to the ceiling, a black puddle on the floor that reflected nothing back at all. Then darkness, then another fragment, none of them connecting into anything whole. The air down there was colder still, raising the hairs on my arms, and it had a taste to it now, a mineral dampness with something underneath it I did not want to name, a faint thread of that same sweet, chemical wrongness I had smelled at the Gap. Bodan's voice was the only solid thing left in the whole world, a thread I held on to with both hands as I went. "You're at the junction," he said. "I can see you on the analog feed. You're just a gray shape, but I've got you. I've got you. Left goes to the plant room. That's your route? That's the one. Right goes to the east tunnel. The plant room corridor is clear. I can see all the way down it from here. There's nothing in it. The tunnel side." He stopped. "Marek, the third one. It's not at the far end of the tunnel anymore. It's moved. It's up near the junction now, on the tunnel side. Maybe 30 feet from where you're standing, just around the corner to your right. It's close. It's very close. I stood at the junction in a fragment of flickering light and made myself go completely still and listen. And beneath the electrical hum of the dying tubes, I heard it. Not footsteps. A sound like a hand being dragged along a wall, slow and continuous. Fingertips trailing over glazed tile. The unmistakable sound of something moving by touch through the dark, because it had no reason on earth to do anything quickly. It was searching for a way through, the way the one at the door had walked itself patiently into the steel, mindless and certain that one existed. And it was between me and nothing that mattered. The plant room was to my left, away from it, down the clear corridor Bohdan had shown me. If I went left now, quietly, on the balls of my feet, I could reach the override before it ever rounded the corner and knew that I was there at all. So that is what I did. I turned left, away from the dragging sound, and I went down the plant room corridor as quietly as a man can move. The way you learn to move when noise itself is the enemy rolling each foot from heel to toe, breathing through my open mouth so the air made no sound in my nose. The boot tool held out from my body so it would not knock against the wall. And behind me, the dragging continued, even and unhurried and unaware. And the relief of putting distance between myself and that sound was so total, so physical, that I very nearly missed the change in Bohdan's voice. "Marek, stop. Stop moving. Stop right now." His voice had dropped to a whisper, absurdly, as though the thing down here with me could somehow hear him through my own ear. It changed direction. The instant you started moving down that corridor, it changed direction. It's coming up the plant room corridor now, behind you. It heard you, or Marek, I don't think it's blind. I don't think it ever was. I think it was waiting for you. I think it heard you on the stairs 10 minutes ago. And it went to the junction to wait. And now it knows which way you went. And it's following. And it's moving faster now. It moves faster when it has a reason. It has a reason now. The reason is you. I froze in the dark, and the dragging sound was no longer behind me and to the right. It was directly behind me, in this same corridor. And it had changed its whole character. The slow, searching, trailing fingertip sound had become a faster, surer rhythm, the sound of a body that had stopped searching because it had found, and I understood, with a sick lurch low in my gut, that I'd been telling myself a comfortable lie about these things all night long, that they were mindless, that they moved without aim or purpose, that I was smarter than they were, that I could think my way around them. This one had laid something like a trap, in whatever ruined fragment of itself still worked in the dark, and I had walked straight past the open mouth of it. And now it was behind me, in a corridor with exactly one exit at the far end, the plant room, and the only way I was reaching that override was forward, fast, with the thing closing the distance at my back. I ran. There was no more quiet left to protect. I ran flat out down the flickering corridor toward the plant room door at the far end, my footfalls slapping echoes off the hard walls, and behind me the rhythm matched mine, and then began to gain on it. And I could hear it breathing now, a wet, rattling, laboring breath that was the single worst sound of the entire night. Worse than the door coming down, because it meant that the thing still needed air, still had lungs working away in its chest, was still, in some unbearable and unfixable sense, a person, somebody's son. I hit the plant room door with my shoulder at a dead run, and it was thank God. Thank the building's old soul, a maintenance door on the brass key. And I had the key out and into the lock. And turning before my conscious mind had even caught up with my hands. and I fell through the doorway into the room beyond, and spun on my heel, and threw my whole weight back against the door to slam it shut. And in the last fraction of a second before it closed, I saw the thing in the corridor, full in a fragment of stuttering light, close, far closer than I had let myself believe. The steward's empty face and its open mouth, and that wet rattle pouring out of it, one hand already rising toward the narrowing gap. I drove the door shut, and the impact of its body hit the other side. An instant later, a heavy, boneless thud that drove me back a full foot across the floor on my heels. And then it hit again. And the brass lock, the old, beautiful analog brass lock that the federal protocol could not see, and could not touch, and could not steal, held. It held. The door shuddered in its frame with each impact, the whole slab of it jumping against my spine, and the lock held. And I stood there with my back pressed against the wood, gasping, my heart slamming against my ribs, in the deep mechanical heart of the building. All around me rose the great silent shapes of the air handling units and the pumps, dim gray hulks in the gloom, dormant, dead. And across the room, lit by a single, steady maintenance work light that ran off some forgotten circuit the protocol had never bothered to seize, stood the panel. The maintenance bypass, the analog ghost. A bank of relays behind a clear, hinged cover, a brass key switch master enable in the top left corner exactly, precisely, as Bodan had described it down to the placement. The one single object in the entire sealed building that could give 80,000 people back the open night. "I'm at the panel," I said into the handset, and the door shuddered against my back as if to underline it. "It's at the door. It's hitting the door. But the lock's holding. Walk me through it. Now. Tunnel, concourse, perimeter." "Tunnel, concourse, perimeter," Bodan echoed, steady, anchoring me, his voice the rope I climbed. "Master enable first. The key switch, top left corner. Your brass key." I crossed the room to the panel, my legs not entirely my own beneath me, and I took the brass key from where I'd set it and put it into the master switch and turned it. And the panel woke up, a row of small amber indicator lights coming up across the top of it, one after another, left to right. The building's old hardware acknowledging that a living human being with the correct key was about to take it back from the machine that had stolen it. Behind me, the door boomed, and boomed again. The same relentless, mindless, patient rhythm. But the lock held, and I made myself stop hearing it. I walled it off, the way you learn over 41 years to wall off everything that isn't the task in front of you, when the task is the only thing keeping people alive. "Tunnel zone," Bodan said. "Second relay bank down. There are 3 toggles marked T-East, T-West, and T-players. Throw them left to right, slow, one at a time. Count 2 between each one. If you go too fast, the inrush trips the master breaker, and then we lose everything, all of it. The lights, the lot." I lifted the clear cover and threw them slow, counting under my breath. T-West. A heavy clunk transmitted down through 3 levels of concrete from somewhere far above. A blast door releasing into its housing. 2 T-players. Another distant clunk, fainter. 2. And then my hand was on T-East, and I stopped because Bodan had told me twice. In plain words, I had repeated back to him. "Whatever you do not open the East Tunnel internal seal." But the override was wired by zone, the whole tunnel zone on one bank, and the East toggle would release every door in the East zone, all of them, including the internal seal between this corridor and the pitch, the seal that was the only thing keeping the thing currently pounding on my door from ever. One day, reaching the bowl, I could not open the people's escape route through this zone without also opening the cage. Bodan, The east toggle. It opens the internal seal too, doesn't it? The corridor seal. If I throw it, the door behind me, the route connects through to the pitch. I'd be turning that thing loose toward the bowl. A silence. And through it the door boomed against my back. Then Bodan, very quietly. Skip it. Skip T East entirely. The east tunnel's own escape route is already sealed from the pitch side. Where you drop the door, those spectators were never going out that way to begin with. They'll go out the west, and the north, and the players' routes, and the perimeter, every other zone. You do not need the east zone open to empty that bowl. Leave T East down. Leave it caged. If I leave T East down, does it stay locked behind me when I leave this room? Does that thing stay sealed in this corridor? A pause. A longer one this time. The door boomed. No, Bodan said at last, and I heard the truth of it cost him something to say out loud. No, it doesn't. The plant room door you're holding right now, it's on the east zone. If you don't power that zone, the protocol keeps holding the building's logic over it. And when you trip the other zones and the perimeter opens, the master breaker is going to detect the override, and the protocol is going to fight back. It'll try to reseal everything it still has any control over. The only doors that will stay open are the ones you've manually thrown on this panel. The plant room door isn't one of them. It isn't manually thrown. It's just locked by your physical key sitting in the lock. And the second you take your key out of the master switch to leave this room, you lose the master enable. The protocol reasserts, and it will cycle that plant room door open as part of resealing the building, because it reads it as an ordinary internal door that should move freely for the medical teams. He took a breath I could hear shake. Marek. To open the doors for the crowd, you have to turn your key out of the master enable and leave this room. And the moment you do that, the door behind you opens, with it on the other side of it. The night had saved its very worst piece of arithmetic for the end. I could open the perimeter and free 80,000 people, but the act of doing it, the very mechanism of it, would release the thing in the corridor into the building behind me as I left, unless I stayed. Unless I kept my key turned in the master switch, holding the enable, holding the plant room door locked under the building's own analog logic, and let the crowd run, while I remained at the panel, the human pin in the track stop all over again, holding the cage shut with my own hand on a brass key, 3 levels underground, in the dark, while the city above emptied of the people I'd saved. I understood then what kind of ending the night had been building toward the entire time. And it was not the kind where I walked out into the dawn. Throw the concourse zone, I said. Then perimeter. I'll hold the master. Marek. Throw it with me, Bodan. Talk me through it. We don't have time. And you know that we don't. That thing is going to bring this door down, eventually, frame and all. And I would rather the people were already gone when it does. Concourse zone. Tell me the toggles. Now. He told me. My voice did not shake, and that surprised me. Sitting here, remembering it now, it came out steady and even. The work voice, the one I'd built over a lifetime, holding to the very end. I threw the concourse zone toggles in their order, slow, counting the 2 counts between each one, and far above me, up through 3 levels of solid concrete. I heard a sound I will carry with me until the day I die, the deep, collective, rolling roar of 80,000 people, as the concourse shutters lifted all at once, and they understood, in a single shared instant, that the building had opened, that the way out had appeared, that there was, after everything, a way home. And the roar was not panic. Bodan was watching it unfold across his last few analog feeds. And he narrated it to me in a voice that had broken open completely, the crowd rising not in a stampede, but in the ordered outward wave I had begged them for. the strong helping the slow up the steps. Goran at his vomitory mouth waving people through with both his big arms. Ilsa's family moving in the press. 80,000 strangers who had chosen, an hour earlier in the dark, to be a crowd and not a mob. Walking up out of the bowl and into the concourse and toward the perimeter doors I was about to open for them. "Perimeter," I said. "Last bank. Tell me." The plant room door boomed against my back, and this time I heard a different note in it, under the impact of a crack. The dry, splitting sound of a frame beginning to give way. Not the brass lock, but the wood and the steel of the door itself starting to come apart under the relentless, tireless hammering. Minutes. I had minutes, perhaps less. "Perimeter's the bottom bank," Bodan said, and he was weeping now, openly, and not hiding it from me. And I loved him for not hiding it from me. 4 toggles, P north, P east, P south, P west, all 4. Left to right, slow as you can stand to go. I threw them, P north 2, P east 2, P south. And as my hand closed on the last toggle, P west, the door behind me cracked again, louder, and a section of it splintered inward in a spray of pale wood. And through the broken gap, I saw the steward's arm come reaching through, the fingers working at the empty air, grasping at nothing, turning at the wrist as it searched, and I threw P west. And 3 levels above me, every perimeter door in the entire stadium rose up into its housing at once, all 4 sides, and 80,000 people walked out of a sealed building into the open night. Into a city that was dangerous everywhere now. Yes, but that was at least a place where they could run, where they could find their families and their cars and the roads out of the dark, where they had a chance. Which is the only thing that any of us is ever truly given in the end. "They're out," Bodan whispered. "Marek, they're out. They're flooding through all 4 sides. The whole bowl is emptying. They're running, but nobody's falling. The wave's holding. It's holding. You did it. They're getting out." "Then it worked," I said. My hand was still on the brass key in the master switch. The plant room door splintered further, the gap widening, the arm reaching deeper through it, the hand turning at the wrist as it searched the empty air for me. And the wet rattle filled the room now, close and constant and patient. And I kept my hand on the key, because the instant I turned it out, the door would finish opening. And the thing would be loose in a building I had just filled, end to end, with open escape routes. And not all of those 80,000 were clear, yet some were old, some were slow, some were still climbing the long concourse steps with children in their arms. And I would not, after everything, after all of it, let the thing I had fought all night to cage, follow them out into the open night, where they were finally free. "Bodan," I said, "when the last of them is clear of the perimeter, you tell me. And then you get out too. There's a route from control to the north perimeter that doesn't come through here, doesn't come anywhere near here. Bodan, promise me you'll take it. I'm not leaving you down there." "You can't reach me," I said, and I kept my voice gentle, because he deserved gentle, after everything. "There's a splitting door and a thing between us. And you opening your control room and coming down here to die alongside me helps not one single person on this earth. Get out. Find your sister. Maybe the hospital going dark just means the phone lines are down, the network's overwhelmed, the whole city calling at once, nothing more than that. Maybe she's standing out in a car park somewhere right now, wrapped in one of those foil blankets, wondering where the hell her brothers got to. Go and find out. That is an order, and it's the last one I'll ever give you. And I've never once in 11 years been wrong about how a building empties. Trust me on this last one." He was quiet for a long moment, and the door splintered, and Then he said, in the voice of a man saying goodbye and knowing it, "The last of them are clear. The bowl's empty, Marek. The concourses are clearing. They're out. Every one of them. All of them are out." "Good," I said. "Now go." The door behind me gave way. I am recording this from the plant room. The single work light still burns over the panel. My hand is still on the brass key, and the master enable still holds. And as long as I hold it, the east zone stays unpowered. And the building's own protocol keeps trying and failing to reseal everything it controls, which means the perimeter doors I threw by hand will stay open, because the override beats the software for exactly as long as the key is turned in the switch. The moment I let go, the protocol wins, and the doors close, and the building goes quiet, the way it always wanted us to be quiet. So I'm not going to let go. There is a thing in this room with me now, and it has my left arm, and the boot tool did not do what I had hoped that it might. And I find, to my own surprise, that I am not nearly as afraid as I always thought I would be at the end, because the worst question of the entire night has already been answered. 80,000 people walked out of this building tonight. Whatever I am in the next hour, whatever this thing makes of me in the dark, that already happened. And it cannot be unhappened, and a man could do a great deal worse with his last good hour than spend it being the reason a crowd got to go home to their beds. If you are still listening, and I hope that you are, I want to ask you the one thing I've been turning over and over since the moment the doors first sealed. The building wanted us quiet. It read silence as safety and movement as threat. And it would have opened on its own eventually, the moment we had all gone still enough to be logs as stabilized opened to let the recovery teams in to count us where we lay. I beat it by refusing to be quiet, by singing, by talking to 80,000 strangers with my own voice and nothing to hide behind, by holding a brass key with the last working part of my hand. So tell me, wherever you are listening from tonight, whatever city is out there in the dark beyond your window, when the systems that were built to keep you safe decide that the safest version of you is a still one, a silent one, a quiet one, what is it that you do? Do you stay quiet and let them open the doors in their own good time? Or do you make noise and hold the key and refuse them? The work light is still on. The doors are still open. My hand is still on the key. And I'm not going to be quiet.